Hello everyone. So in this video, I will demonstrate how to install MySQL Server and MySQL Workbench. And what are these? So I have in the entire course, you can use the online version of MySQL if you do not want to go through installing the application in your computer, and maybe just going quickly into hands-on demonstrations and applying your skills, so you can use the online version, the online website. So if I quickly share my screen, if you can see my screen, you can quickly use the online website. So you have sql-workbench.com. So the sql-workbench.com is an online version of MySQL Workbench. And what is MySQL Workbench? MySQL Workbench is an application that is a client application where you can use to write your SQL queries to either create your database or to retrieve information from your database. So it's the application where you write your SQL query, um, um, write and execute your SQL query to be able to either store data, update data, or retrieve data from a database. And what is MySQL Server? MySQL Server is the server side of MySQL. So the database is usually stored in a server, and the workbench is the client. So you write queries in the client, and these queries are executed on the server. So the database is in the server. You write your commands in the client, which is MySQL Workbench, and MySQL Workbench communicates with the server and tells the server, can you execute this query and give me the data from the database which is found in the server. So it has this client server communication. When when you're dealing with databases, there's always this client server communication between the client where you are writing your SQL queries and the server where the data is stored and where the database has been created. Some applications, like such as MySQL Server, some applications have the client and the server within the same application, whereas some applications you can install the server separately from the client and use the client to communicate with the server to create databases within the server and to retrieve databases from the server. So during this course, we'll be using an online version of the client known as sql-workbench.com. And the reason why we're using this website is because we do not want, sometimes the installation process, people have issues when installing this software, and so we do not want to delay progress. We want people to be able to quickly get into hands-on and quickly be able to start applying the skills they have learned in this course, and that's why we have made available the online versions of MySQL Server, where you can write your code to create your database or write your code to retrieve data from your databases. So during this course, we'll be using this websites or these online versions, which is sql-workbench.com and also sql-practice.com, where we will also be retrieving data from these websites. The difference between sql-workbench.com is this one doesn't has an empty database. So you see there are no tables within the sql-workbench.com. So we'll be using this particular one to learn how to create a database or create tables within the database, and also to store data within a database. That's what we'll be using the workbench, the sql-workbench.com for. While the sql-practice.com has already a pre-existing database within it. So we'll be using this website to learn how to retrieve data from a database, and you can see it has a hospital database within it already, a pre-existing hospital database within it, with four tables within it. So you have the patients table, you have the admissions table. If I click on the patients table, you see that we already have existing data within this database where we can learn how to write queries to retrieve data from the patients or the admissions or the doctors tables within this database. But for learners who are very interested in building their own databases for their organizations or building their databases for their companies, or if you own a small business and you want to build a database for your business, it is important for you to learn how to install the MySQL workbench within your computer and the MySQL server within your computer, so that you can be able to write your own queries within your computer, create your own database that will be found within your computer and not online, and be able to manage your own database. And also have, and because the MySQL Workbench application comes with many features where you can connect to all the data sources, it's very important to also learn how to have these within your computer and not just rely on online services or websites that are available. So this video, I'll teach you how to install MySQL Server, which is the server where the database is being created and saved, and MySQL Workbench, which is the client that communicates with this server to retrieve data from the database. So let's start with the server. So we want to be able to install MySQL Server, and we will install the version 8.0.42. It's a popular MySQL Server version. Or if you just put MySQL Server download, you will see it has brought up the 8. MySQL Community Server 8.0.42, where you can download this, or you download MySQL installer. So you can click on this as well, and this is the server. We want the server. So if we click on MySQL Community Downloads, we want the server. If we go back, yep. Sorry, if we click on downloads, we want the MySQL installer for Windows. So we want, this is MySQL 8.0. MySQL 8.0. Yes, so this is MySQL. So if I clicked on MySQL Community Downloads, you have the MySQL installer. We want the installer so we can automatic, because an installer is a file where you can just click and install the required server. So you do not need to go through complex installation. It automatically installs the server for you in your Windows. I'm using Windows, so I'll go to MySQL installer for Windows. And under it, I'll see different versions. I've seen 8.0.42. And I want this installer, right? This is the installer I want for my computer. Is the Windows, my computer is 64-bit, so I do not want the 32-bit, I want the 64-bit. So let's go back, let's click back on my SQL Server 8.0.42 download. Let's just write that. So we want to download the MySQL Server 8.420. So if I click on it, this comes up, but I want the installer. So let me click on the installer. I do not want the 32-bit, I want the 48-bit. So let's go to archives. And let's see if we have the 4.2, that's fine. MySQL Server, Community Server, and I want, so this is what we want, right? We want the 8.0.42, right? 8.0.42, where's 8.0.42? This is 4140. Oh, let me see, MySQL Server, I don't know, 8.0. Okay. I do not want the 42 bits. Let me see if we can get the 48 bits. So just put MySQL Server. Okay, and I see it now. So you see, this is, if I just put the MySQL Server, the MySQL website comes and you see MySQL Server 8 point this is what I need, the 8.4 installer. And this is the 32-bit, and I need the 64-bit. Let me just install this and see if it works. So this is 8.0.42. It is the 32-bit MySQL Server installer. I'll download this, and it's downloading, and it has downloaded. So I now have, if I go to downloads, I have my SQL Server, which is in 8.0.42. So if I click on it to install it, so it's installing. I'll drag this here. So I'm installing the MySQL Server, and this is the MySQL Server being installed, and I want to install just the server. I want to execute. Again, while it's installing, remember we came to our browser and we just searched for MySQL Server. And under MySQL Server, we went to MySQL installer 8.0.42. We clicked on it and we found this installer link where we had to download. We had it for Windows. So we downloaded that installer, and now we are installing the MySQL, and the server has been installed, has been downloaded. It's about to be installed. We click on execute again, and it's installing. So while the MySQL server is being installed, I will open another web browser to install the client, which is MySQL Workbench. So again, we'll just search MySQL Workbench. We can put download as well. And we have download MySQL Workbench. This is the client we want for Windows, and we want to install for Windows. So we will install this for Windows. We will download MySQL Workbench. So we're downloading the MySQL Workbench. Again, no thanks, just download. So it's downloading. So I'll check my installation. So the server has been installed and it's been configured. So just keep going to next. We want to developer, just leave everything as it is. This is the port where you can connect to the server, the port within your computer, just leave everything as it is. Strong password, just leave it. And you need to create a password, a credential. So just imagine the server is a room where you're storing the data, right? You need to create a credential to be able for people to be able to access the database within the server. So you need a credential. So we'll create a password. For this password, I'll just create a simple password. I'll call it password 2025 underscore hash. So I'll call this password 2025 underscore hash. So I've created my password, which is a simple password called password 2025 underscore hash. And this is for my root account. And this is the password I will use to connect my client with my server so that my client can be able to access the database within my server. So I've created my password. I'll leave the service as this, and I'll just grant full access. I'll not change anything, and let's execute. It's installing. So while it's installing, let's go and see the workbench. So this is my SQL Workbench, which is the client. So I'll click on this. And this is the client. So let's see the server. So you see the server, everything is installed. The server has been started and everything. We have blue ticks everywhere. It means our server is up and running. So we'll finish our server and we'll put next. So configuration complete. So that's perfect. and we have finished installing our server. So now we want to install our client, which is MySQL Workbench. We'll go to next. And it has given us a location where it wants to install the client. We'll put next, and all will be installed. Let's say yes, and let's install, and it's installing our client. So our client is being installed. So let's wait while it in. So perfect. Our client has been installed. The installation of MySQL Workbench, which is our client, is finished, and we are launching MySQL Workbench. And I'll pull. So MySQL Workbench has launched this. So this is where you write all of your SQL queries. But remember, the client does not have a date, it does not have a server, it doesn't have a date, it doesn't have a server, and it's only in the server that the database can be created. So the client, which is MySQL Workbench, needs to connect to the server, which is MySQL Server. So if you see here, we have MySQL connections. So we can create a connection. So you see this plus sign here. So let's click on this plus sign, and we can create a connection. And again, if you remember the port number for our data for our server, this was the port number of our server, 3306. So this is how we need to create the connection with our server. The host name is 127.0.0.1. This is the IP address or the host name for our computer. So it's usually for all computers, it will be 127.0.0.1. So for all computers, this is what we call the host name, or what we call the local host. Either you can call this one port, or you call it the local host, which is the server within your own computer. So this IP address for the server is usually the same. 127.0.0.1 is our local host, or the IP address for our local server. Remember, the root name was root, and if you remember, we created a password for this root. And if I go now to password, let me see, store. Remember, I created a password, and I called this password 2025 underscore hash. That was the password I created for our server to be able to connect to our server. So it's extremely important when you're creating your server for you to remember the password you use to create your server, because when you want to connect your client to your server, you need to specify that exact password which you use to create your server. That password is your credentials, which you give people for people to be able to access the server. And so you have to keep that password very private and very secure, because if someone has access to your password or your credentials, they can be able to access databases, and that is a security breach. In this case, I've just created a password, which is easy just for demonstration, but in the real world, you should not give your password to anyone. So I'll give OK, and we have our password selected. We can call this connection test database. Name of the connection, test connection. Let's just put test con, and let's test our connection. And successfully made the SQL connection. So this was successful. It means the credentials we gave we gave our data, our client is exactly the same credentials we created our server with, and you see there was a successful connection that was made, and we can now click on OK, and you see we have our test connection. And now we can open our, if you click on our test connection, this is what we call MySQL Workbench. It's a very comprehensive and powerful client for writing SQL queries, creating databases, and doing a lot of complex functionality. So you can create users. You see, it has a lot of management, server status. You can check the server status. This is our server. If you remember, our server is within our local computer. You see the server is running. You can see how much the CPU is being used. You can see a lot of things about the server. You can come here to the top left corner. You can create a new SQL tab. This is where you can write an SQL query. So if we write, let's create our first database. So let's create the keyword create database. Let's call this database test. So this is our first database. So to create a database, you use the keyword called create database, and the name of our database is called test. And if you see, there is this thunder or lightning icon here, which means we want to execute this query. So if I highlight on this and I click on this lightning icon here, which says execute the selected portion, if I run this, you see it has a green tick. It has created our database called test, and so it has been executed. When you see a green tick, it means everything has worked perfectly. And if you now go to our server, where can we check our database now? If you go to data export, data import. Okay, so you see data export, you see we have our test data. You see this our database which we created called test, and we have our test data. You also see that you can import data from other sources. So imagine you had a database somewhere else, you can actually import that data into your SQL server, and you can write more queries to do other things. We have created our database. You can write queries to create tables within our database and also to visualize your database. So if you want to see your database, if I click on database, let's say manage connection, connect to database. Okay, this is still the connection. I'm trying to see where we can find our database. Okay, yeah, this is schemas. So if you look here, we have schemas. And if I do a refresh all, we have our tests. So you see, I was under administration where we manage our databases. If you go to schemas, you see you have our database, and our database is empty. So there are no tables within our database, no data, no tables. We have our database called test. So now you have seen, this is a live demonstration on how to create your server where you store your database, and how to create your MySQL Workbench, which is the client which you use to connect to your server to write SQL queries or to execute SQL queries on in your server. So that said, if you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section. If you're finding difficulty still installing MySQL Server and MySQL Workbench, which is the client, please let me know in the comment section and I'll be able to help you out. So thank you, and thank you for watching. All the best.